If I asked you to describe your financial situation, could you accurately tell me where you are, what you have? Would you even be willing to? No matter what your situation is, I promise you, I've heard worse. I'm Sara McCullough, certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, and I'm sharing some of the stories I've experienced over my career, taking those lessons and turning them into actionable steps for you to use. This is I've Heard Worse. What if you knew that you were making good decisions with your money? And I'm defining good here as working towards your goals, building financial security, being able to do what you want today and tomorrow without risking either one. What if you booked a trip, knowing that all of your other financials and all of your other goals were still okay? What if you planned a renovation, career change, gift to family, gift to charity, and knew that you were still going to be fine? Today, we're going to talk about how to picture your future and how working with a financial planner can make that future a reality. Here's where you might be today, and we're going to talk a little bit about why it's so frustrating. Do you feel like you're not sure what's affordable, especially when it comes to housing, and housing plus all your other stuff? Do you feel like you don't know if you're saving enough? You don't know how much is enough? And if it's not enough, what happens to tomorrow? What if it's too much and you're missing out on things? We've talked about all of these questions. So why are they back? Because they're that common. Because these are the things that are holding us back from our opportunities, or they're pulling us directly into the risk zones that we have. They are pulling us towards the cracks. And those feelings, that uncertainty is frustrating. Think back to the first episode. On average, we are spending 15 hours a week worrying about our money. We're not spending 15 hours a week solving. We're spending 15 hours a week worrying. So all of these thoughts, feelings are normal, they're common, and they are deserving of answers. This worry is telling you that something is wrong. That's what worry's for. And ideally, when we feel that worry, we then take steps to solve it. And so what we're going to talk about today is not just what financial planning can solve, but what happens after we solve it. What happens next? And the first step towards solving is being clear about what you want today and what you want tomorrow. So what do you think it would feel like if you weren't worried about what was affordable anymore? What if you knew you were saving enough? Sit for a minute and figure out if that weight was gone, if that swirling worry was gone. How would it feel? What else would you think about? How might it affect your relationships with your family, with your career, with others? Reducing and eliminating that worry doesn't just impact our bank accounts. It really does impact both our personal and our professional lives, our relationships, and our overall sense of fulfillment. Because when we know what we're doing and the future impact of that, we've got certainty. So let's talk about how planning is going to get you to that certainty and get you to your goals. And to do that, in the first example, I am going to tell you two stories. We're going to talk about the similarities in them first. They both involve first house purchases. They actually both involve single people in the same city at around the same age. They both had new and stable careers. Both of them were renting, and they were getting frustrated. Because for one of them, there was roommates, and for the other one, they were actually spending as little as possible on rent, which meant in a very expensive city, you did not get a nice apartment. So they came home from a career that they had worked years to get into, and they really excelled at. And they came home to a ratty basement apartment. That's hard. And they both came to me with the question of, what if I buy a house? Because I am done with renting. Both of them did have down payments, and both scenarios would have involved sizable mortgages. So it was the same process for both of them. The planning process was the same. I showed both of them in their meetings what would happen if they continued renting and what would happen if they purchased. And each of them had their own goals on what they wanted in a home, but we talked about not just their goals, we also talked about the dollars that were possible. And both clients had a number of how much more they could spend in rent and still meet all of their other saving, spending, and retirement goals. So one of the things that I think is really important to hear in this story is, I believe, to make a confident decision about choosing something, in this case, buying a house, you also need to know what happens if I don't choose that. What happens if I continue renting? Because if you don't know and you're just assuming that owning is better, that is the classic look before you leap scenario. And that doesn't always turn out the way we want. So both of these clients knew what it would look like if they continued renting in different places. Because remember, both of them were frustrated with their current situation. So both of them had a scenario where I said, if you spend this much more in rent, you are still financially stable today, and you will in fact be financially stable tomorrow as well, based on the goals you've given me. And then they each had a scenario about what if they bought a house. And the first client did purchase a house because he decided that's what he really wanted. He actually bought a fixer-upper and he loved it. And so he would go to his job that he also loved, that he was very good at, that he worked years and years to get into the field. And then he went home and fixed up this house. And he loved it. Was there financial risk in there? Yes, because he was now a single income homeowner in an expensive city. But he was willing to work hard to get to that goal and maintain home ownership. Because he had done his planning, he also knew what was affordable. And he purchased in an affordable bracket. He purchased at a level that he still had the funds available to do the renovations. And so he was able to plan that out as well. And so he is now happy with his choice, financially stable, and able to work towards other goals. The second client also moved, and they continued to rent. They actually just rented a house, so they ditched the roommates. Because once this client saw the total costs of owning, which were higher than they had anticipated, but the other thing that became more clear to this client as we had this discussion, this client actually didn't know that this was the city that they were going to settle in. Again, they were new in their career. One of the priorities that really moved up the ranking in these buying a house conversations was that this client actually wanted the flexibility to move, possibly really far away. This client started saying, you know what? I love being in this city now, but the company I work for has other locations. I actually really might want to leave because there's nothing in particular that really ties me to this city. So I don't want to own here. I don't want to put down the financial roots of owning when I don't know how long I'm staying. And this client doesn't plan to buy for the foreseeable future. This client is also happy with their decision, financially stable, and working towards other goals. So different choices, but the same result. Happy, financially stable, working towards other goals. And I think one of the key differences for the second client who chose to continue renting, they now have very different experiences in conversations with people about this idea of renting is throwing money down the drain. Because this client can actually answer that for themselves. And in their situation, it's not. And again, this is a big one. This is a big assumption that people make, and it may not be true for you. I think the story of these two different clients, both had a planning experience, both had very similar visible characteristics, and they made very different decisions. And they did end with the same result of happy, financially stable. And this is based on, again, just financial planning. None of our conversations had to do with either of them purchasing a product from me, a particular strategy. It was really about how are you going to use the money that you have to meet the goals that you have. And when you have big decisions like this, you don't have to do this alone. So there aren't really good reasons not to pursue a financial planning discussion for yourself. But let's talk about what does hold people back from working with somebody like myself. And these are reasonable things. And I want you to think through, does that still apply though? Or does it still apply and my desire to get these questions answered actually overrides my reason to stall? So the first objection that comes up in conversations about financial planning is clients or potential clients say, it's going to take too much time. That sounds like a lot of work, Sara. I don't have that much time. I'm just going to point out that worrying also takes your time, and it doesn't get you anywhere that you want to be anyway. Are there times where you really don't have the time? Yes. Yes, that can be absolutely legitimate. And in fact, I regularly get emails where I might have done an introduction call with the client 12 to 18 months ago. I sent out a proposal. I didn't hear from them. And then I get an email that says, I'm ready to do planning now. And sometimes for a split second, I have to go, what? Who? So is it common to have an introduction call and a proposal done and you don't take it up right away? Because legitimately, you do not have the time. When we say time, we also often mean energy to approach this process right now. Yes, that is true. But if that's what you're telling yourself, I also want you to think about, when does the need to know and the need to change your relationship to your money and your need to start protecting your future and finding your opportunities, when does that overrule your time shortage? Because again, worrying takes time. And if you think about your life, when in the next 10 years are you going to be less busy? And if your answer was, I have no idea, then what I'm telling you is, when you can find time to do your planning, it is going to change your next 10 years and beyond. Some people think, I don't need an expert. I'm smart. I'm comfortable with numbers. I can do this on my own. How's that going? Feeling confident? Feeling clear on today and tomorrow? You might be. If you were, I'm not sure you would have listened this long. I think you have some questions that you would benefit from seeing the answers. Because all of my clients are very smart, very capable, and some of them are also extremely comfortable with numbers. I have a number of clients who are accountants, who are investment advisors, who are other financial planners. I have a financial planner, not because I don't know what I'm doing, but because I'm too emotionally close to the situation. So you may be okay. And this isn't a smarts question. This is an objective view question. This is a comprehensive view question. Because how do you know what you don't know about your own situation? And what if you did know what you didn't know and you could make better decisions? If you listen to the Sara's Shoes story in a previous episode, those clients were financially fine before meeting with me, and they are financially fine after meeting with me. But what they wouldn't have had was a pair of shoes that she really loves. They have been traveling more. They have been spending differently. So would they have been fine? Yep. Would they have had this much fun? No. There's some interesting research that's been done on workplace teams. And workplace teams that are formed where participants don't know each other actually come up with more creative solutions and ideas. And I want you to think about that when you think about doing your financial planning on your own. Can you do it? Maybe you can. Is it going to be the best creative solution that's out there? Not if it's on your own. Advice-only financial planning can often cost more than people expect. I hear that feedback regularly. And to that I say, what were you expecting? In the Q&A episode, I talk about, particularly in Canada, the wealth management industry has said to clients that financial planning is free. It's not free. It takes a lot of time, energy, and expertise. None of that comes free. So I want you to think about what you were expecting. Because probably, if you're honest, you were expecting free. Because that's what the wealth management industry told you. And you still have questions. Likely after getting something called a financial plan done by somebody in the traditional wealth management space. So how valuable was that to you? I also want you to think about how much you value information, how much you value context, advice, expertise. And I want you to think about if your situation could change by 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, is that worth it to you? How much would you pay for that? Because first of all, it's not free. And second of all, the outcomes post-planning can change your situation by that much. When I look at the question for clients about when to take CPP, it's a very common question in Canada right now, has been for a number of years. I can change your estate value by 6 figures just by moving that date. Is that important for you to know? If it is, I want you to weigh that potential against the cost of having a financial plan done for you. I also want you to think about the value that you place in yourself and the value that you place on your time and effort. Because if you knew that you could retire now, what is that worth to you? If you knew that you could gift to family, gift to organizations that are meaningful to you, if you knew that, what is that worth to you? How would you change your life? What would you do differently? And what is that worth? And I'm going to give you, again, a shorter story about how can advice change outcomes and what might that be worth. Some of the work that I do is with clients who have recently lost their jobs. And part of their severance package includes financial planning sessions. And many of these meetings, when I get their paperwork ahead of time and it says, what questions do you have? The number one answer is, how do I avoid tax? How do I protect my severance amount from tax? And most of us know if we put money into our RSP, that will reduce my tax. True, but I want you to know your context. So when I had this discussion with a younger client who had been let go, client was younger, they had a smaller severance amount, about $20,000. And her first comment was, I'm going to use my RSP room and avoid the tax. I think the other reason this strategy is so common is we often feel slightly guilty about having unused RSP room. We feel like we really should have used that. I want you to let that go. So this client, again, you have a very short timeline to sign back to agree to your severance package. And as the client, as the person in that situation, we combine that idea with, I only have a short time to make a decision about whether to put my severance money inside my RSP or not. That is generally a false time pressure because you actually have until February of the following year to make a deposit to your RSP that you can use against this year's income. So the first thing I talk to these clients about is this idea of false time pressure. You don't have just until you sign the package back, actually. You have until the next RSP deadline, actually. So that's the first thing. Don't operate under false time pressure. Just knowing that, you can see some of the weight come off of these clients. Then generally in these meetings, I ask, do you expect to need this money for day-to-day expenses? And this client in particular, younger, $20,000 severance, said yes. If I can't find a job in the next 3 months, I am going to need this money. And so then I explained that if the money went into an RSP, it absolutely can come back out, but then it will be taxed. So they've eliminated that tax benefit that they thought they were getting, and that RSP room is lost permanently. And that comes as a surprise to most clients that I meet with. And what I recommended to this client was, I am recommending that you don't put that severance payment into your RSP. I am recommending that you ask for it to be deposited to your bank account. Put it into a savings account. And if you find a job and that money is untouched, then put it into your RSP. So once you have restabilized, once you have eliminated some uncertainty, then deposit it to your RSP. And tax-wise, 3 to 5 years from now, you will be farther ahead. And just to put a number on this, I said the client was younger. The client is 38. It was a $20,000 severance. If they were to put that money in and earn 4% a year over the next 22 years until they turn 60, that's $47,398. That's what would have been lost if they put it in and then had to pull it back out. So no tax savings because it went in and went out. What the loss was that $47,000 because they lost that $20,000 in room that they used and then almost immediately had to unuse. So when you're unsure about the value of financial planning, when you think it is just for rich people, I want you to think about $47,398 on one decision. We're often intimidated by having financial conversations with anybody. We're probably even a little intimidated to have them with ourselves, never mind a professional or an expert. And I get it. And an introduction call is just an introduction call. We're going to talk about your biggest questions and concerns. I'm going to talk about how I work with clients. And you are going to decide from there. And you don't need to prepare anything for that call. You don't need to have anything figured out. The reason you are coming is for more and better information. And that's how you take the first step and gain momentum and gain control and confidence over your finances. I am going to put several links in the show notes because I would love it if you can find a way in. And whether that is through a direct meeting with me, whether it is through a direct meeting with another advice-only planner in Canada, because I'm going to put that link in the show notes too, or whether it's just getting more information. If you are somebody that just says, right now, I don't know that I can take on a whole planning process, and there may be very legitimate reasons for that, but if your money is also causing you worry, I want you to start finding a way to settle that worry down. And there are a number of sites that have really great information, and I'll put those in the show notes. There is some software that can really help sort out what's happening day to day in your finances. I will put that in the show notes. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to another Canadian podcast that I think does a really good job of more on the technical side. So a lot of information in there about investing, about markets, but also about financial planning. And that can be a way in for you. If you love information, if you love the technical aspects, you might enjoy listening. And if that gets you one step closer, I think that's great. Because once you start doing this, once you move yourself one step, you do get immediate benefits. You get clarity, you get confidence, you get relief from overwhelm and worry. And there will be a trickle-down effect to your bank accounts, to your investment accounts, to your debt levels. Because right now, that lack of clarity, that lack of confidence, that worry, it is controlling you. So I want you to turn around and face it. What if your situation is as bad as you think? Well, it's that bad whether you know it or not. Don't let your situation continue to pin you in a corner. Do something. Doing something is going to move you in a direction that you want. Doing nothing is going to push you in a direction that you don't want. So again, look through the links in the show notes. Figure out what is your way in right now, this week. There is a way to have a better relationship with your money, and it's worth the work to get there. To use your money in ways that are valuable to you is the point of money. So just do one thing today. Decide on one question to ask, one action to take. Because you are worth so much more than one thing, and you can do this one thing for you. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out the other episodes. There are 12 in this series, each one focusing on a different important aspect of financial planning. You can listen from start to finish, or pick and choose the episodes that matter most to you. Consider sharing an episode with someone else who needs to hear it. Thank you for liking and subscribing. And remember, no matter what you think of your financial situation, I've heard worse, which means you and I can make it better.